Years ago, there was a Buddhist magazine which had an article on Buddhism and its encounter with psychology or psychotherapy. And then it had a picture on the cover of, it looks like a psychoanalyst sitting in his seat with a couch in front of him, and lying down on the couch as though he's undergoing psychotherapy is an image of the Buddha. Of course, it's not done with malicious intent, but I'd say it's a kind of a way of showing disrespect, not proper representation of the Buddha. Okay, so speaking with admiration and respect about the Buddha, and of course having the right attitude towards the Buddha, right mental conduct of always maintaining one's respect and reverence towards the Buddha. And of course, the most important way of behaving rightly towards the Buddha, what the Buddha himself enjoins, is Dhammanudhamma Patipatti. That's practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. And then behaving rightly towards a disciple of the Tathagata. So this would be referring, since the Buddha is speaking, of course, while he's alive, so he'll be referring to his own immediate disciples. So he'll be referring to the monks like Sariputta, Moggallana, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, and the bhikkhunis like Kema, Upalavanna, Kisagotami, and so forth. But nowadays, when we're thousands of years separated from them, still, one should maintain a respectful attitude towards the great disciples and think of them with esteem and speak. When one speaks about them, one speaks with respect. And in our present day, towards especially lay people, towards the monastic order, one should always treat the monastics with respect and some degree of esteem. And it doesn't mean that you can't criticize a monastic who's not behaving properly, but if you do so, one should do so in a gentle way, a polite way, a respectful way, not speaking harshly and bitterly towards them. But if you see them behaving improperly, then you can call them aside at the right time and then discuss with them their misbehavior. Okay, the verses pretty much just sum up the points made in the prose portion of the discourse. It speaks about the faults of misbehaving. So because of the unrighteous conduct towards mother, father, and so forth, the wise criticize you right here in this world, and then after death, one goes to a bad rebirth in the realms of misery. And when one behaves rightly towards the parents, the Tathagata, the disciple, one generates much merit, one gains praise in this life, and after death, one goes to a good rebirth. Okay, let's take a few suttas, then we'll ask for some questions. Okay, this is quite a shift in the topic of the sutta. And so this is discussing 4 kinds of persons found in the world. And here we have a person who goes along with this. First, the text will give the outline, it enumerates the persons, then it will give the explanations. So the one who goes along with the stream, the one who goes against the stream, the one who is inwardly firm, and the one who is crossed over and gone beyond. Also called the Brahman who stands on high ground. Oh, whoops. No, I don't want to go shopping. Yeah, what's interesting in this sutta is that we have a different meaning ascribed to the word translated as stream. So we have two senses of the word sota, meaning stream, in the early Buddhist texts. So we could say that there's a negative meaning and a positive meaning, a negative stream, a bad stream, and a good stream. So what is the good stream? The good stream we have in the expression sotapanna. So the sotapanna is one who has entered the stream. And so there the stream is the Noble Eightfold Path. That is the stream, this world-transcending stream that carries one to Nibbana. And so when one becomes a stream enterer, one in a sense falls into the stream of the Noble Eightfold Path. And that stream flows on and carries one ever closer until one enters the great ocean of nirvana. So that is the stream in the good sense. And then the stream in the negative sense would be the stream of, we could say, of the worldly defilements, the stream of greed, hate, and delusion. And so that is the meaning of stream that we find in this sutta. So the one who goes along with the stream here, in Pali, this is the Anusotagami. Yeah, this is the Anusotagami Pugalo. The one who goes along with the stream is the first person. Then we have the one who goes against the stream. This is Patisotagami Pugalo, going against the stream. So we have two relationships with the stream. And so what is the person who goes along with the stream? Here it is the person who indulges in sensual pleasures and performs bad deeds. So that person goes along with the stream, the worldly stream, the stream of worldly desire. I think we find the stream mentioned also in the Dhammapada. There's a verse that says there is no stream like craving, no fire like hatred. Is that how it goes? Nobody has the Dhammapada on hand. Yeah, it's something like that. Okay, so that is the person going along with the stream. And so often the texts speak about the uninstructed worldlings, the unlearned people of the world are those who go along with the stream. And then we have the person who goes against the stream. This is the Patisotagami Pugalo. And so this is first, it says someone who does not indulge in sensual pleasures or perform bad deeds. So that, you could say, is a general characterization of the one going against the stream. Because the stream is the tendency to indulge in sensual pleasures and to perform bad deeds. But then the text adds some other terms or other statements about the person who goes against the stream. It says, even with pain and dejection, weeping with a tearful face, he lives the complete and purified brahmacharya, spiritual life. Yeah, so it says sahapi dukkena, with dukkha, with suffering, and with domanassa, with sorrow, unhappiness, or mental dejection. Then asu is tears, and mukha is face. So with a face, with tears streaming down, and rudamano is weeping. Still he lives the paripunang, the full or complete, parisudang, fully purified brahmacharya, spiritual life. And this could be referring to somebody, you think if somebody is leading the monastic life, they're always smiling and happy, and when we come out in public, we're always supposed to be smiling and happy and cheerful. But when one is going against the stream of the worldly desires, sometimes there's calls for a strong and bitter inner struggle. Of course, the Buddha teaches methods or techniques for helping to overcome the pull of the worldly desire. But still, those emotions and forces, especially, I have to say very frankly, it's the force of sexual desire that pulls a person who's leading the purified brahmacharya, the celibate life, pulls them away back towards the worldly life. And so when one is resisting that pull of lustful desire, sometimes I don't know any other monks who actually led the monastic life weeping with tears streaming down their face, but often with pain and dejection and inner conflict. But the Buddha praises the one who remains determined to continue in the monastic life, the celibate life. But of course, if one is not able to continue to lead the celibate life, then one is entitled to leave the robe and return to the lay life. There are no lifelong vows in Buddhism. And in actual fact, of those who take monastic ordination, my own experience in Sri Lanka, because in Sri Lanka it's customary for boys at the age of 12, 13, 14, either their parents offer them as gifts to the monastery to be ordained, or else on their own they come up with the idea, if they come from a Buddhist family, I want to be ordained. And so they enter the monastery, and maybe when they're in their early teens, they're living quite happily, late teens, still fairly content, but some doubts and struggles are starting to manifest. Early 20s, start seeing the nice, pretty girls who come to the temple to offer the food. And then that determination to continue in the monastic life starts to wither away until it breaks, and then it's off with the robe and back into the household life. Okay, but this is a person who is still continuing to lead the pure brahmacharya, with struggle, with inner difficulties, but with determination, going against the stream. Okay, then, and this could include anybody, I would say, this could include anybody from a worldling, an ordinary person of firm determination, through a stream enterer, and even perhaps a once returner. Even the stream enterer, monastic stream enterer, could be torn by worldly desires, by sensual desires, to the point that if they're going to continue leading the spiritual life, they'll do so with inner struggle. Okay, but now we come to the person who is described as inwardly firm. So the word that describes this person is titato. Yeah, and this is a compound of the word. I'm getting the sun right in my eyes. Okay, it's a compound of tita. The word tita comes from the verb which means to stand, titati. So it means one who is standing, but standing steady, standing firm. And then the word atta, which means self, but of course it's not referring to the metaphysical self, but you could say to the mind or to the person. So it's one with a firm personality, steady, strong personality. This is a person who can no longer revert from the spiritual life. And this is the person who is the non-returner, the person who is utterly destroyed the 5 lower fetters. And so the 5 lower fetters, we have the view of self, doubt, the clinging to rules and observances. But then we have the 2 fetters of sensual lust and ill will or aversion. So those fetters have been destroyed, especially the 4th and 5th. Those are the fetters that tie one, that bind one to the desire realm of existence. And so when those 5 fetters are utterly eradicated, then one is no longer subject to rebirth into the desire realm, but one takes spontaneous birth into the form realm or the fine material realm. And one never comes back, one never falls away from the form realm, but one attains one's final liberation there. So that is the person who is said to be inwardly firm, steady, immovable, unshakable. And then finally, I guess the image here, okay, we have the person who's being swept along by the stream of sensual desire. Then the person who's going against the stream, and probably the one who's inwardly firm would be somebody who is starting to come up to the shore, who's gotten across most of the river, and now he's at the point where the bottom of the river, is starting to rise up towards the shore, and so he's able to stand in the river and to walk the rest of the way to the shore. And then we have the fourth person. This is the one who is crossed over and gone beyond, and who stands on the high ground, on dry ground. And this person is described as a Brahmana, not by caste, but this is the way the Buddha is reconceptualizing the meaning of the term Brahman. So it's not the person born into the Brahmin caste, but it is the person who is the Arahat, the one who has reached the pinnacle of sanctity, of holiness. And so this is the person who has destroyed, eradicated the asavas, the taints, and realized by direct knowledge the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and who is able to enter that liberation and dwell in it. So that's the person who's crossed over and gone beyond. Okay, so those are the four persons, and then let's see if we have anything interesting that's added in the verses. Okay, so we have first the people who are, these will be those who go along with the stream, those who are uncontrolled in relation to sensual pleasures, who are not rid of lust, but indulge in sense pleasures here, who repeatedly come back to birth, old age, and death, immersed in craving. Those are the ones who go along with the stream. Then the one who goes against the stream is the wise person who has established mindfulness, who doesn't resort to sense pleasures and bad deeds, who should give up, who's striving to give up sense pleasures, even when it's painful to do so. Okay, then the person who has abandoned 5 defilements, that is the 5 fetters, still in training, not yet completed the training, but unable to regress, one who's attained to mastery of the mind, faculties composed, that is the non-returner, the one inwardly firm. And then the person who has comprehended things high and low, far and near, burnt them up so that they've gone and exist no more. The sage who has lived the spiritual life, reached the end of the world. That is the one who has gone beyond. Okay, maybe now we could take some questions, either this sutta or the previous one. No questions. Okay, if no questions, then we just go on to the next. Okay, now we have a sutta in which I'm going to go sort of quickly through suttas which are fairly obvious. Okay, so this sutta has 4 kinds of persons. Okay, one of little learning, one who has little learning, and is not intent on what he or she has learned. Yeah, it's a rather strange use of this word, upapano. Upapano literally means arisen. But I want to see how the commentary glosses this word. Anupagato. Okay, not come upon. Anyway, my rendering here is a little bit interpretative. So we have one of little learning who is not intent on the little that they've learned, one of little learning who is intent on what he has learned, one of much learning who is not intent on what he has learned, and one of much learning who is intent on what he has learned. Okay, so we'll take just the first and the last of these four. Okay, so we have the person who is of little learning and is not intent on what he has learned. Okay, here someone has learned little, and and here the sutta mentions 9 genres in which the early Buddhas classified the teachings of the Buddha. So we have the discourses, which are taken to be suttas, in simply in prose, in complete prose, then suttas which come in a mixture of prose and verse, then expositions or analyses. These are suttas in which the Buddha will begin with an outline of terms and then give a longer, more detailed analysis of the terms. Then suttas spoken entirely in verse. Then we have a class called inspired utterances, then various quotations, then jatakas, birth stories, then something called amazing accounts. Probably these are accounts of miraculous events. And then questions and answers, suttas that take the form of a kind of catechism where somebody will ask a series of questions and the Buddha or one of the great disciples will reply to each of the questions. So these are these are 9 categories. So this is said to be the 9-fold Dhamma of the Buddha. Okay, so somebody has learned little of these types of teachings and does not understand the meaning of what he has learned, does not understand the Dhamma, and does not practice what he has learned. Okay, so that's how one is of little learning, who is not intent on what one has learned, who doesn't make the effort to understand the meaning, to understand the Dhamma through the meaning, and does not put the teaching into practice. And then the opposite is the one who has much learning and is intent on what he has learned. One who, after learning these 9 types of teachings, understands the meaning, understands the principles or the Dhamma, and then practices in accordance with the Dhamma. Okay, and then of these 4 kinds of persons, which is the one most highly praised by the Buddha? Yeah, of course, the 4th kind. Okay, I think the verses just recapitulate the meaning of the prose text. But then the last verse is nice. So it says, when a disciple of the Buddha is highly learned and expert on the Dhamma, endowed with wisdom, like a coin of refined gold, who is able to blame him? Even the deities, the devas, praise such a one. By Brahma too, he is praised. Okay, then we have four kinds of persons who adorn the Sangha. So these are a monk, it's a bhikkhu, a bhikkhuni, a male lay follower, a female lay follower, who are competent in the sense of learned, well-disciplined, self-confident, learned, experts on the Dhamma, practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. So we have those four kinds of disciples. Okay, now we come to an important sutta. Not that the others are unimportant, but it's just that the meaning is fairly obvious, straightforward. So here the Buddha is speaking about what he calls the four kinds of self-confidence that the Tathagata, that the Buddha possesses, possessing which he claims the place of the chief bull, roars his lion's roar in the assemblies, and sets in motion the Brahma wheel. Here we actually have in this description three metaphors are used. The first is that of the asaba. It's asabang tanang. Yeah, an asaba is the chief bull in the herd of cattle. And so that's one image of the Buddha, is that of a bull in the herd of cattle. And then the other second metaphor that's used here is that of the lion sounding his lion's roar in the assemblies. And then the third image is that of turning a wheel. So when the Buddha starts to teach the Dhamma, the first discourse, what is the name of the first discourse of the Buddha? Right, it's Dhammacakka Pavatana Sutta. So Pavatana is setting in motion, and the Dhamma itself is compared or illustrated by the symbol of a wheel. So it's called Dhammacakka. But here the Dhammacakka is called Brahmacakka, because apparently, I guess in Indian mythology of that time, the god Brahma was supposed to rule over all of the other deities by virtue of possessing this wheel. The wheel is the symbol of sovereignty. And so the Buddha is seen as the sort of human counterpart of Brahma, and his Dhammacakka is spoken of metaphorically as the Brahmacakka, the wheel of Brahma. And the commentary, I think, says that Brahma here has the sense of chief or supreme. And the qualities that the Buddha possesses, these are part of a fixed group of qualities that are ascribed to the Buddha in several suttas. So the Buddha has two primary sets of qualities that distinguishes him from all the other great disciples, or from all of the great disciples, which the qualities that inhere in a Buddha and entitle him to set in motion the wheel of Dhamma. In other words, to function as a fully enlightened Buddha, the one who can establish the Dhamma in the world. Without these sets of qualities, the Buddha can't function as a Buddha. So the two sets of qualities, one are the 10 powers of knowledge. I won't go into them now, but you'll find them in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 12, and they'll occur also in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of Tens. The 10 powers of knowledge, 10 Tathagata Balas. And then the other set are these 4 grounds of self-confidence. The word is Vaisarajani. Yeah, this is an abstract noun it's derived from the word visarada. Yeah, the word visarada means absence of hesitancy, timidity. So sarada is like timidity, hesitancy. So if I say, come sit up here and give the Dhamma talk today, and then I assign it to you and you think, oh, I can't talk, oh, I'm so afraid, I'm nervous, oh, I can't do it. That is being sarada, having that hesitancy, doubt about one's ability. And somebody who has complete confidence in teaching, leading, and so forth is visarada. And then the abstract noun that's formed from this is vaisaraja. It's done by strengthening the initial vowel, and then we add to the adjective, we have vaisaradya. But then, as you know, in Pali, dy turns into a double J. Okay, so what are these 4 qualities that enable the Buddha to claim the place of the chief bull in the herd, and so on? The first is his claim to perfect enlightenment. So he says, I do not see any ground on the basis of which anyone, whether it be some other ascetic or a Brahmin or even a deity or a Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world might say to me, though you claim to be perfectly enlightened, there are some things, some dhammas about which you are not fully enlightened. And so you can see in the Pali, so Pati Janato is claiming, so you claim to be a Sammasambuddha, to be one who is perfectly, fully enlightened, but there are some things, some dhammas, some principles about which you are abhisambuddha, that you haven't fully understood, that you haven't fully realized. So the Buddha says he sees no ground on which anyone might bring up that criticism of himself. And so he says, since I do not see any such ground, I dwell secure, fearless, and self-confident, attained to self-confidence. And this is taken to be, in the commentaries, to be a way in which the Buddha is asserting his knowledge of omniscience, the Sabbanyutta Jnana. I keep on having trouble finding my... this is where it is. Yeah, so the commentaries say that this is an implicit claim, the Buddha implicitly claiming to have omniscient knowledge. But when the texts ascribe omniscient knowledge to the Buddha, it doesn't mean, at least from the standpoint of early Buddhism, that the Buddha is claiming to know every fact about the world, like how many people will be sitting in Kuan Yin Hall on November 2nd, 2019. I don't think he would have claimed to know that back 2,500 years ago. But probably what would be intended is the knowledge of all of the principles that have to be understood in relation to the bad destinations, the good destinations, and liberation. So the Buddha knows all of the principles of wisdom, the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense bases, 18 elements. He knows the workings of dependent origination. So all of those principles he fully knows and understands. Not trivial things which are of no concern to an enlightened person. Okay, so that is the first ground for self-confidence, the claim to be fully enlightened in regard to all dhammas, all principles, we could say. Okay, the second ground of self-confidence, he says, I do not see any ground on the basis of which anyone might reasonably criticize me, saying, though you claim to be one whose taints, whose defilements are destroyed, there are some defilements that you haven't destroyed. So here, with this ground of self-confidence, the Buddha is asserting that he has utterly eradicated all of the defilements. Among them, the most basic defilements, which are the asavas, the taints. And what are the asavas? Have to speak more loudly. Okay, you could tell me the Chinese. We take the microphone.
That's Kama Sava, Bhava Sava, and Avijja Sava.
Okay, so it's the taint of sensual desire, the taint of craving for existence, and the taint of ignorance. So those are the three asavas. Excuse me?
I was wrong the third one, I have to confess.
Oh, I couldn't hear so clearly, so. Okay, so anyway, so the Buddha is able to claim the destruction of all the defilements. So that's why he can teach others a path that leads to liberation from all defilements. Okay, then the third ground of self-confidence, he says, I see no ground on the basis of which anyone might reasonably criticize me, saying that these things that you have said to be obstructive are not able to obstruct one who engages in them. So in other words, the Buddha teaches that there are certain things that are obstructions to realizing the goal of the spiritual life. And somebody might come along and say, you're saying that these things are obstructions, but really, maybe for some they're obstructions, but not for everyone. Some can indulge in them and they won't be obstructions for them. And this is actually, it seems, this third ground of self-confidence comes up in a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's sutta number 22, the Discourse on the water snake, where there was a monk by the name of Arishta, who is going around claiming, even though the Buddha said that indulgence in sensual pleasures is an obstruction, but in my opinion, that isn't an obstruction for one who indulges in sensual pleasures. And so then the other monks criticized that monk Arita, and then the Buddha criticized him, but he kept on insisting on his point of view. Okay, so this is the third ground of self-confidence. And then the fourth ground of self-confidence is the confidence that he says, I see no ground on the basis of which anyone might reasonably criticize me and say that this Dhamma does not lead one who practices it to the goal for the sake of which you are teaching it, namely the complete destruction of suffering. So the Buddha, when he teaches the Dhamma, he does so with the confidence that if one puts it into practice, then it will lead sooner or later to the complete destruction of dukkha, of suffering. So those are the four kinds of self-confidence that the Buddha has, by reason of which he is able to claim the place of the chief bull, roar his lion's roar, and turn the wheel of Brahma. Okay, any questions at this point? Oh, nobody has questions today. Okay, then we go on. Oh, okay. So we have craving, four bases for craving that arise in a monk. Look, this is a very short sutta, we don't have to be detained by it, but these are the four, sometimes they call the four requisites or four supports of the monastic life. Robes, alms food, lodgings, Those are the three. And then the fourth is craving for the sake. Is a rather obscure expression. I think I'm not in, that's why. Iti bhava nyata bhava, life here or elsewhere. Okay, nowadays, I have to say that monastics tend to get a surplus of robes. Because robes are now commercially manufactured, monastic robes. And so there are, like in a country like Sri Lanka, what they call dharma shops, where a layperson who wants to make an offering of robes or any of the other requisites except for food, well, maybe not lodgings, but you can go into the shop and you buy the set of the 8 requisites. That's a set of the 3 robes, the alms bowl, a razor, monastic razor, a water strainer, the belt, and also you could buy Buddha images, little stupas, incense, the incense burners, all of these items you can buy easily in the Dharma shops. And the robes, of course, are made commercially, so they're very easy to obtain. But you can imagine in the Buddha's time, making a robe would have been a major process. You have to make the threads. You didn't have the instruments, mechanical ways of weaving thread. And so it was a very difficult process of making a robe. And nowadays in the monasteries, like here, it's Zhuangyan Monastery, we wait till we hear the gong ring, bang, bang, bang. We just get up and go into the dining hall and there's the meal ready. But in the traditional Buddhist countries and in ancient India, most of the time the monks would have to go on alms round. And it was not always, you're not always living in the midst of a Buddhist community. So you could be living, if you're traveling, walking through the country, you could be coming to a village of Brahmins who are hostile to Buddhism. And so you go on alms round and you might get nothing. You might be abused and chased away. Okay, so these are 4 bases of craving. Okay, we'll try to finish this sutta. Okay, here the text is speaking about the 4 bonds. And interestingly, the Pali word that's rendered as bond is yoga. Yeah, you can see it here. The 4 yogas. So the word yoga in ancient Buddhist texts has 2 primary meanings. One of the meaning is bond. And you can see the connection with the English word yoke. The yoke is what is used, put on a pair of bulls. I guess do they put yokes on horses? If you have a pair of horses?
Yes, if you're driving a big carriage.
Yeah, okay, so if you have like a cart being drawn by horses, you would use the yoke to keep the horses together. but mostly in the farming community would be used on a pair of oxen to join them together when one is plowing the field. So that's one meaning of the yoga, is a bond. And the bond is what joins us, connects us, just as the yoke joins the two oxen. So the yoga is what binds us to samsara, connects us to samsara. And then the other meaning of yoga, I don't know how it developed out of the same verb, the same root, is effort, endeavor, striving. And of course, in classical Hinduism, one has 3 or sometimes 4 kinds of yogas. So there is the jnana yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge, the means to liberation through wisdom or knowledge. Bhakti yoga, the means to liberation through devotion, love and devotion. Karma yoga, the way to liberation through work. And then Raja yoga, the royal yoga, that is the method of meditation. In Buddhism, we don't have different yogas in that sense, but the Buddha uses the word yoga to mean spiritual striving, spiritual effort. So that's probably how the word yoga came into Hinduism, to mean the striving for liberation or realization in any of these different ways. And then later, different other types of yoga emerged, including what is known as Hatha yoga, which is the yoga of physical exercises. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha speaks about 4 kinds of bonds, 4 things that bind us to samsara. So there's the bond of sensuality, the bond of existence, the bond of views, and the bond of ignorance. Okay, so what is the bond of sensuality? So first, someone does not know as they really are the origin and passing away, the gratification or enjoyment, the danger, and the escape in regard to sensual pleasures, liberation from sensual pleasures. So when one does not understand these things, then sensual lust, sensual delight, and so on, sensual craving, lie deep within in regard to sensual pleasures. So that is called the bond of sensuality. And what's interesting is the verb that's used here. Is the bond of sensuality. Is anuseti. Oh, maybe I won't go into that. Okay, so that is the bond of sensuality. Then the second bond is the bond of existence. And we'll see that this is not the bond of existing as such, but first we have someone does not understand as they really are, the origin and passing away, the enjoyment, the danger, and the escape in regard to states of existence. These are the different realms of existence, the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm. And so when one does not understand these things as they really are, then it is the lust for existence, the delight in existence, the thirst for existence, passion for existence, the attachment to existence, the craving for existence that lie deep within in regard to states of existence. That is called the bond of existence. Okay, then in regard to views, the bond of views. So again, one does not understand the origin and passing away and so forth in regard to views, then that lust for views, delight in views, attachment to views, craving for views, that lie deep within in regard to views, that is the bond of views. So in each case, it's attachment, lust, clinging, craving, that is the bond. And what differs are the objects, sensual desire, states of existence, and views. But in the fourth case, it's a bit different. Here, we have the bond of ignorance. So someone does not understand as they really are the origin and passing away and so forth in regard to the 6 bases for contact. And so one does not understand these things as they really are, then ignorance or unknowing in regard to the 6 bases for contact, that is called the bond of ignorance. Okay, so that's the bond of ignorance. I think we should pause here and then continue with the sutta next time, because there's another side to it. And to continue with the sutta will take us it'll take too much time. And I've already reached the stopping point. Well, maybe I could just do it rather quickly. No, I think we want to go through this more slowly, since it's very important. Okay, so we'll pick up on this, continue with the sutta next week. Okay, so I think you're wrong when to get the page for the sharing of the merits. Okay, so we'll do... Okay, so Carolyn, you get the sharing. Okay, so we'll do the sharing of the merits now. Okay, so we share the merits of the meditation and the Dhamma discussion with the devas, the nagas or dragon spirits, the bhutas, the fair spirits, and with all sentient beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang akasata chabumata deva nagamhidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavadacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham he sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham he sampadang punya sampadang sabbe sata anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagopadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we could stand and we do 3 half bows to the Buddha.